I like to start talks by just reflecting on where we've come from, and that lady there with the TV set is probably 30s, and just reflect in terms of where that was and where we are now. Okay, let's see if we can get the buttons right. There's a ham shack back in the early days, and some of you will recognise the 320 and the tune lines and those sorts of things. That's actually 3ZPA's ham shack photograph. Now Peter Wolverton, 3RV, and that's what was his TV transmitter. And you can see the rack there, which was all a part of that, and that characterised amateur TV back then. And again, I have to reflect on where we are now in terms of that. That particular little article that came out was pinnacle, really, in terms of people sort of getting on to or thinking about getting on to amateur TV. And I don't know whether Ian is still with us or not. Roger would know. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So that was significant, and lots of us back then built those converters, and they were very successful in getting people watching amateur TV. When I started back in the 70s, Pete Wolverton and there was another guy over in Essendon, and that was it. And I was in Wantirna South, so there was only 3 of us. And of course, they're the sort of pictures we were dealing with. We were sort of right on the edge of the noise factor there, and just to get a call sign through was pretty good. So we've certainly travelled a distance from there. So where are we now? The majority of ATV now is high definition digital. I don't think there's any analogue left, and that's the way of the world. So just to show you that we're a bit of a niche in terms of numbers of amateurs, there's people that I know of in VK2. They're the people I know of around Melbourne. They're the people that I know in VK4, and I'm looking forward, Pete, to getting the Brisbane repeater back, because one of the things that is pivotal with amateur TV really is that if you have an amateur TV repeater, it generates activity, and it will generate activity using the repeater, but it will also generate activity in simplex modes and other modes. So it's a very important thing. So Peter, I'm 100% with you. Having visited Rias yesterday, I can't help but think that that would be a great site for an amateur TV repeater as well. But of course, they do amateur TV from there. There's the VK5 guys. Unfortunately, Adelaide has dropped out a little bit, and we've got a TV repeater at Port Pirie there, which is really ideally situated, and most of those stations are actually over in Whyalla. So that goes across the bay there. That's where we were yesterday, some of us, at the barbecue, and obviously that site there is ideal as well. And I know that Rias transmits every Wednesday night, and that's really good. I did contact Tony Bedelf, VK7AX, who does transmit television material from Ulverston up there in the north, but Tony didn't return a couple of emails, so I'm not sure what is happening up there in the north of Tassie. We did have one station, 7EM, Winston Nichols, who we used to work across Bass Strait, And Peter Walden, actually 3RV, was the first guy to do that with Winston, and a few of us then followed Pete, and that was really good. All right, continuing on. That's just a summary of how many people are in the British Amateur TV Club in Australia, and that club probably is the biggest amateur club in the world, I would think, because not only has it got a very large contingent in the UK, which is where it's based, it has a very large contingent internationally as well. And it is a pivotal organisation in terms of getting kits out and getting activity in terms of ATV across the world, undoubtedly. So we've got some options in terms of television standards. We've got the DVB-T standard, which is the terrestrial one, and there's certainly some advantages in DVB-T. And we've got the DBS standard, which is the satellite standard. In Australia, we adopted the DVB-S standard probably because we were able to get boards from Germany, where there was a manufacturer who was also an amateur, and he was one of the first persons actually to generate digital TV in Germany, and they were the first SR systems. So a few of us imported some SR systems boards, and we're all on DVB-S. And one of the things that we could do with DVB-S was we could use cheap satellite set-top boxes, because they tune directly across 23 centimetres direct. So there was the ease of receiving DVB-S with those satellite set-top boxes. That's a DVB-T spectrum. We call it Bart's head. Of course, the analyzer is incapable of resolving all the sidebands that are there with a very complex orthogonal frequency division multiplexing situation that's with that one. And that's what DVB-S looks like. And obviously the characteristics of the two technologies is a bit different. I didn't hear that one, but never mind. Okay, we've got one allocation on 70 centimetres, and pretty much everywhere that's used for the repeater outputs, although we do some simplex on 70 centimetres, which I'll chat about shortly. 23 centimetres, we've got 4 channels allocated. There were actually 2 analog channels, and we've divided those 2 analog channels into 4 digital channels with about 7 meg bandwidths each maximum. So that's pretty much the frequencies that are in use. There's a little bit of activity on 2.4 gigs, but not too much above that. I have a 10 gig analog TV system, which I've had 1 contact on. So I'm looking for people who might be interested in some 10 gig ATV. We talk about definitions in terms of the resolution of the picture, and there's the basic details of all of them. Most of us are around in the 1080p high definition situation. I don't know anyone who's got 4K 2160p. So yeah, but it's still amazingly high definition stuff. You can put the picture up on a large screen and it stands up absolutely. So there's some fine activity going on from that high definition point of view. Most of us use QPSK modulation, where we've got just 4 phases. The carrier can be on any one of those 4 phases. There are obviously more complex modulation systems if you wish to use those, but there's not too much advantage. Well, there's no advantage in terms of transmission efficiency in going up to those higher ones. Just for example, that shows you what the amplitude and phase options are with 16 QAM, and it goes up to 56 QAM, but I don't think anyone is up there. I did have VK3RTV on 16 QAM when we were at Olinda. I've moved it back down to QPSK because we're on a lower location now, and that's been very successful. And no one knows the difference in terms of the actual resolution of the pictures. The modulator is really incapable of making those phase and amplitude changes directly. So we have an IQ modulator, and I hear somebody else has got an IQ modulator. So that's what every DATV station has. There's an MPEG encoder to take and compress the video, and then we have the IQ modulator and a linear power amp. And one of the problems for us is that a linear that would be good enough for single sideband is certainly not good enough for DATV. It would produce a signal that had significant intermod, meaning that the bandwidth would suddenly double or even worse. So yeah, there's the example, 18 watt so-called linear, maybe 2 to 3 watts you can get out of it. DVB-S, you can press that a little bit more than DVB-T. So that's why perhaps some of us have stuck with DVB-S, because we can just get that little bit more of energy in terms of that. Transmitters, they're all hybrids. Sometimes the processing is done in a PC first, and then to an IQ modulator, or even the IQ modulator might be done in the software. So there's hybrids of mechanical and electronic versions, and then there's software versions. But there's always software involved in it anyway. It doesn't matter whether you've got a hardware system. There's software underpinning that. So we are controlled by those that now have that ability to do some fairly complex programming. The British Amateur TV Club produced a Portsdown project. Portsdown actually is a location in the UK, and this Portsdown system is significant in getting people on the air for DATV, and that's a 7-inch touchscreen. That is the starting point for operations using the Portsdown, and the Portsdown will transmit DVB-S. It will also transmit DVB-T. It will also transmit on 70 centimetres and down to 2 metres. In fact, in the UK, they are transmitting narrowband TV on 2 metres. So the Portsdown system is very, very excellent in terms of that. Certainly, there's a lot of software underpinning all of that, of course, and there's a Raspberry Pi that sits behind that 7-inch screen, and then you need maybe a Lime SDR Mini, or maybe a Pluto if you want narrowband stuff. So an SDR is required after the Portsdown, and then obviously some power amps. That's the block diagram of the Portsdown. That's a little bit out of date these days, because all of the video stuff now is HDMI. So we've all got rid of a whole lot of video leads recently, and we've converted everything to HDMI. So that's been the case with the Raspberry Pi. It's got a HDMI input, and therefore you can have a HD system running on the ports down. As well as that, there's all sorts of little toys in the software of the ports down, and it's got a band viewer like that, and that's actually my 1246 haystack on that band viewer. And there's lots of other little toys in the software of the ports down. The gentleman that does the software is a genius in my view, and he keeps coming up with more and more and more updates. And all you have to do to get the update is you just plug your ports down into the Ethernet, and you go to the menu and say update, and it all just scribbles down and you get it direct. So it's a fantastic service. And that's sort of indicative of the British Amateur TV Club and the guys that are involved in it. There is a bit of an argument about DVB-S versus DVB-T. As I mentioned, the early adopters were all DVB-S. But the later adopters are mainly DVB-T, and there's some reasons for that. The arguments for DVB-S is that you've got the cheap satellite boxes as receivers, and as a communication medium, it's easier to get the signal through. Matter of fact, there's a quite a significant difference between a DVB-S and DVB-T in that. And you've got the Ports Down project that supports DVB-S, so that's very good. And you can get DVB-S2 with the Ports Down, and that's the high definition version of DVB-S. In the terrestrial, you've got the cheap domestic set-top boxes available, and you've also got cheap modulators because they're available for operations in buildings and flats. And then you can use an up converter, but it's more difficult to develop linear power. And there's the 4 to 5 dB more headroom that you require for DVB-T versus DVB-S too, and that's significant sometimes when you're looking to achieve that contact. One of the big differences between perhaps working phone, working CW, is that with digital there's a plateau, and all you have to do is make the plateau. And it doesn't matter whether you're 1 dB above the noise level or 10 dB above the noise level, it won't make any difference. You're there. So you're either there or you're not there. And I'm sure some of you have seen that with your domestic TV sets, where the signal's there or it isn't. And if it's there, it's perfect. And if it isn't there, well, and maybe there's that just little weeny bit where maybe it pixelates a bit. So 4 to 5 dB is significant from that point of view. That's a little block diagram of an up converting system where it uses a domestic TV modulator. And you can now get all sorts of modules, and I'm sure you're aware that on eBay and AliExpress, the rest of them, you just Google around and you can find these mixers and local oscillators and everything. So you can patch a system together by doing that. So you don't have to be a PCB designer or anything. All you have to do is be able to assemble stuff and maybe assemble some SMA connectors and things like that. But you can assemble a system fairly easily. This is John's 280U's system. You can see the domestic modulator there in the front. And then just looking underneath, he's got a local oscillator modulator. Yes, you get that from AliExpress. And there's a mixer there. Well, I'm not sure where we got that from, but probably eBay or Ali or wherever. And there's a mini kits 23 centimetre driver there, and his homebrew bandpass filter. There's a view of a DVB-T system, which is actually mine. And that's a Hyde's DVB transmitter. You buy it direct from Taiwan. It's a package deal that's going, and there's a menu system that sits behind it, and it sits in your hand. It's a very small little device. But they're a very professional organisation, Hydes. If you've got any issue, or if you've got any problem, you just email them, and look, they're back within an hour with an answer. So, you know, I do recommend that company from that point of view, because they're extremely supportive. The actual PCB in the Hydes TVB transmitter is very professional, and it's an excellent device, and it's quite versatile. It won't only work on 23 centimetres, it'll go 70 centimetres and higher. It goes up into the gigahertz as well. So it's a pretty good thing. So that's almost a turnkey thing. I've just got a little mini kits amp after there, and there's a few amps in mini kits that are pretty good. That's my SR systems, which is the German boards. And again, I did hear a presenter previously talking about the fact that chips are not available. Well, I know we've got the last boards out of Germany a few months ago, and the manufacturer told me that if we wanted to order any more, it would be a 12-month scenario. So I'm just hoping that those boards survive, because there's little hope of any repair, even if they don't. But they're a very professional thing. The SR Systems actually is a company that manufactures for commercial TV, and he simply made the boards available at a discount to us, even though that discount was, from our point of view, was very, very expensive. That's one of the mini kits, little linears, and there's some other ones out that are even better. The thing that we always look for is the third order intercept, and hopefully that's really as high as you can possibly imagine. And 41 dB for the third order intercept indicates that, you know, that's a pretty little linear device, and we can use that as a driver, and it's quite nice. Again, though, you can't drive it up to its limit by any stretch of the imagination. Some of you will be aware of the Mitsubishi modules that used to be around. Mitsubishi have now ceased manufacture of those. They're still available around on eBay, but they're a diminishing supply, unfortunately. In terms of other options, you've got Dirt Modern's amps, which are really high quality, but again, quite expensive, and I'm sure, you know, some of the guys running SSB on various frequencies would have perhaps some of those. In terms of receiving, well, there's lots of commercial options. You don't have to build a receiver. You do have to build a preamp invariably, so there's lots of different options. I mentioned just a little while ago that the BATC ports down system would go down to lower frequencies. Well, they put out a receiver called the Knucker. Now, the Knucker is actually a dragon that comes out of a hole in England, theoretically at least. So I'm not sure why they named it the Knucker. But it's a kit, and it receives DVB-T, and we're actually using it on 70 centimetres and using fairly narrow band options, and certainly, you know, bandwidth and then power density goes together. So if you use less bandwidth, you're going to have an easier path in terms of being able to work people. So I can work across town on 70 centimetres with a Knucker and narrow band, but I cannot work across town on wide band, normal bandwidth, 7 meg stuff. But on 1 meg bandwidth, yes, I can get across Melbourne quite well. So it's a nice thing. It's H.264 encoding, which is still high definition. The only difference is that it doesn't reproduce motion, at least fast motion. But we're down to 1 megasymbol there, which and we can go lower. We can go down 333 kilohertz, and of course we're now thinking about maybe we can do this on 6 meters, or maybe we can. There's a lot of talk just internationally now about maybe we can do it on 10 meters, and we're thinking about, well, what sort of bandwidths can we get down to? And so that's something for the future, and I'm certainly developing a 6 meter system that we'll see how we go with that. And I know Roger 5YYY also has a 6 meter system all ready to go, so that would be a path between Melbourne and Adelaide, quite good on 6 meters and quite often. Anyway, that's the knucker there, you can see that. And the SDR Mini there is a part of the transmitter. That's actually driven from that ports down module that you saw before. So the ports down module drives the SDR Mini, and then the SDR Mini goes into a larger PA. And beside that, you can see there the knucker receiver. That's the front end. And the knucker receiver works back into that 7-inch screen, or you can put it up on a bigger one if you like. So that ports down, again, is just so versatile that you can use it on wideband high definition, you can use it on narrowband, you can use it on DVB-T, you can use it on DVB-S. Really good. Digital receivers, well, again, off the shelf. And one of the things that is problematic with 70 centimetres is that it's not on a commercial TV frequency. With the old analogue TV sets, when you press the button to scan, more modern ones at least, it would scan completely across the bandwidth, and therefore it would pick up whatever is there. But the digital sets don't do that. They frequency hop. So they hop over our 70 centimetre band. So what we need is a set-top box that you can manually put the frequency in. And they're becoming less and less and less because, as everyone's aware, most of the new appliances that you get, you just plug it in and it sort of reboots and just sets itself up, and that's it. So they're designed to be as simple as possible. But strong are very good. There's a representative in Hallam in Melbourne, and they actually changed their software so we could manually put the frequency in. So we use those for 70 centimetres. Right, okay. I guess we might just fast track. I'm just showing you some of the stuff that's available, just to show you some of the repeaters that are around the place. There's RTV mount view, and the big heatsink there is 500 watt amp, and we run that at about 100 watts out. Some block diagrams, satellite multi-switch, that's integral in receiving, that enables one single antenna to feed multiple receivers. Block diagrams of RTV, more block diagrams of RTV. You can call a signal report down from RTV and it will tell you how you're going, which is quite nice. That's RBO in Bendigo. That's a fairly simple system, but it's DVB-T high definition. That's 5RDC in Port Pirie, and you might recognise the person behind. You probably don't recognise the person behind, but he's the guy that generates the TV component of the national broadcast every week, and I'm damned if I know how he does it. It's a fantastic thing. Again, that's 5RDC. There's their power amp, which is a commercial one. I think that's about 50 watts, that one. That's RTS up in Lawson in the Blue Mountains. And RTS is perhaps a bit more amateur, perhaps in that sense, but the actual quality of the signal is excellent. It's actually in somebody's ham shack up in there in the Blue Mountains, so I guess they don't have to be as neat and tidy. And just to finish up, that's 3QL's DATV station. You can see he's got VHF and HF radios there. He sits at the console and he's got a screen behind him, and a bit like Rias in Tasmania, it's all smoke and mirrors, and he does productions. We have a regular Tuesday night net, and you want to have a look in, Ian runs it on YouTube. It'll run on the BATC streamer, British Amateur TV Club streamer. So Tuesday night, you'll see activity from Melbourne.